Welcome everyone to the April Focus Series. Today's topic is, jeepers, let me start again. Today's topic is a practical asset map, where we're going to go through practically how you can bring features into your client engagement process. So if we think about, as financial planners, we always want to show clients that we understand them, that we understand who's important to them, that we understand what's important to them, and that we understand what they want to achieve. And in today's session, we're going to work through a really simple, practical example where we're going to talk through the different features and how you can bring them into your client engagement process. Because we want to always show and illustrate value by enabling and assisting clients to meet their goals. So I'm going to go through a very simple example, and I know that we all have our own approach, our own client experience. This is just an example of one. But as we walk through it, think about your client engagement process and how you can practically bring in some of these features into that process. So let's get started. We're going to meet the Funferens. First thing I want to point out is you'll see that I've, opened up present mode on Asset Map, which just makes Asset Map, full screen. But you'll also see that it's sort of grayed out and you can't see the map. Now, this is a great feature that we added, and it's great if you're presenting to a client and you've got it up on a screen, when you start the meeting, to put this present mode on and to gray it out, or even if you're having a virtual engagement like we're doing today, because it stops the client from being sort of distracted by the map when you first walk into the engagement, but it also creates a nice reveal moment where you can share the map. So how we put that on is, if I'll just click on the map, on the icon there. But when you're in Asset Map, you'll see this icon in the top right-hand corner here. And by clicking that, it'll just full screen Asset Map. And then right at the top of your screen, you can click on the Asset Map logo. It then whites out the page. And to reveal, you simply click on the logo again. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the Funferens. So we have Jack and Amanda. They're married. Jack is 35. Amanda is 34. They have a son, Jan. How we know about this client, you'll see we don't have a lot of information about the Funferens on the map at the moment, but let's assume that this client was referred to us by another client, that Jack, for some reason wants to understand a little bit more about his retirement. Maybe he had a member's benefit statement and showed us Amber, and he wants to explore more of that. In this example, I'm assuming that I've sent out the discovery link and Jack has completed that, and this is the information we got back from that. So not a lot of information. Again, I want to keep the example quite simple. So what do we know about Jack and Amanda? We know that they're married. We know that they have a son, Jan, through the discovery, and we know that Jack's earning an income and has a pension fund. But now remember, when a client goes through that discovery process, right at the end, it asks them, what is top of mind for you? And since we've added priorities, anything that is completed in that what is top of mind for you section automatically pulls through to priorities. And we can now access priorities right here in the sidebar. So the first thing I want to do is have a look at all the information that they've completed. So we know what they've completed in terms of financials, but I can have a look here under priorities and see that they included, or Jack included, retirement planning and providing a legacy as two of the things that he wants to explore in more detail. So now in this first conversation with the clients, I want to unpack that a bit more. I want to understand more of their current situation. I want to understand their priorities. Do we have all of them? What sits behind that for them? Why are those the ones that are top of mind? And we could do this in any order. I could first focus on the current picture, or I could focus more on priorities first. For this example, I'm going to start with priorities, but we could do it either way. So I'm going to go ahead here and click on priorities in the panel on the left and open it up here. You'll see when I open up priorities, I've got two tabs at the top here. The first one being identify and the second one being importance. I always want to start on that identify. I want to unpack what the client has illustrated and also unpack if there's other priorities that they want to achieve. So here I'm going to be having a conversation with Jack around, you mentioned retirement planning as being top of mind for you. Tell me more about that. I want to understand When is he looking at retiring? What does retiring look like for him? What are the things that he wants to achieve before and after retirement? What sort of income would they need from a retirement perspective? So you're going to use this screen to sort of unpack that conversation with the client. And then very importantly here at the top, if I open up a specific priority, I can rename it. And here we always want to name it with the words the client uses. We want to create that connection between what they want to achieve and this priority. So let's say through that conversation with Jack, he mentions that, the key thing for him is retiring comfortably at age 65. Then I want to use those words and put that in the name. I can also go ahead and put in any additional notes about what retirement means for him, what sits behind that for him, what are the specifics that he wants to achieve, and then updates. And you'll see then it changes the name from the generic retirement planning to now the words that I've put in, retiring comfortably at 65. And so we would continue to unpack these priorities with the client. You can see here you also mentioned providing a legacy. I want to unpack that in more detail, understand what that means for them. And that could mean many different things. It could mean, I want to make sure my family is comfortable in the event of death, that they can sustain their lifestyle, I want to cover debt, or I want to leave a specific legacy. Let's say for the purposes of this example, that here he says, the main or the first priority is sustaining the lifestyle in the event of death. Okay, so I'll go ahead and put that in and update. But you'll see below the line here, there's a whole lot of other priorities that we can work through with the client, because often when you ask a client, what are your goals or what are your priorities, they don't always know offhand, oh, this is what I came to talk to you about, or this is what I want to achieve. So working through these different lists here, I can see which ones the client relates to, which ones feel that, is something they would want to look at as well. And I can simply click on them from here to add them up to the top, and then I can rename them. I can also select other, but another quick way of doing it is just clicking this plus over here. So let's say through this conversation with Jack, we also talk about his son, Jan, and he mentions that, Jan is 14 at the moment, wanting to study engineering in 4 years. He's put some funds away for that, but he wants to explore that in more detail as well. Instead of adding one from the bottom, I can simply just click here and type it in. So I can say he wants to assist Jan with his engineering degree. Okay? And then I simply click add. So you can very easily add your own priorities with your own names or select from the ones at the bottom here. Once we've done identifying what are the priorities the client wants to achieve, then I can flip over to importance. Sorry, Benny, you want to add?
Can I just say one thing first?
Please.
Because this is so important. Like, don't assume we know what the client means if the client, for example, clicked retirement planning. And so what I find really useful is, let's say, unpacking the retirement discussion, then untick financial foundation or most common and click the retirement planning one. So it pops up different types of retirement planning conversation, because it could be around tax, it could be around liquidity, it could be around their parents or their kids or whatever. It could be a million different things. And it's just a way to say to the person, listen, retirement planning is quite a broad
encompassing.
And where do we start? Does any of these resonate with you, or is it something completely different? So that's the purpose of these blocks, just to start prompting some of the topics around underlying each of those overall umbrella topics.
100%. So it's enabling and surfacing or giving the space for that conversation, around what does it really mean for you? So I love that. Thanks, Benny. And then if I flip over to importance, I can also turn the library off. So once we've identified it and I don't want the library at the bottom, I can just turn that off so that we can focus in the conversation here. And here I want to talk about, okay, if we have a lot of different priorities or goals that we want to achieve, how do we prioritize within that? What are the ones that are most important that we want to do first versus what are the ones that maybe is something we want to do over time, but they're not the top priority. And here I can just move them around to the different importance groups. So let's say in conversation with Jack, he says, actually sustaining lifestyle in the event of death, that's probably a top priority for me. And secondly, I really want to assist Jan with that engineering degree and be able to just give him a good start and good footing. Maybe with retiring comfortably, while that's very important, we know he's 35 at the moment, so he's got a bit more time. So let's assume that he says that's of normal priority. So you can see how we've used this with the information that came through from Discovery. We've explored it, expanded it, understood exactly what that means for him. We would also want to unpack financially, what do these goals require? Now I want to go back into the map because now that we've done priorities, I want to expand the conversation around their current financial picture. We want to gather more information. And as we know, we're always going to use stencils for that. We want to apply those templates and explore with the client. You can still apply templates or stencils by right-clicking and selecting stencils here, but we've also recently brought that into Sidebar. So right here, I can click on the stencils icon here in the sidebar and it opens up here. Right at the top, you'll see My Stencils. That's all the stencils that you've created for your practice. They will all sit here. And if I go below that, there's the public library where we've created a whole lot of stencils that you can use for your clients, depending on the conversation you're trying to enable. So there's different ones for pre-retirement. That's a full household stencil. That's great for gathering information. Or there's specific stencils for things like businesses, trusts, or any basic needs. So you've got the list here. In addition to the stencil list here, I can expand it. And you'll see that there's a little icon here, a little picture icon. And that's to let me preview the stencil before I apply it. So I can click on that, have a look at when I apply this, what are the blocks that it's going to add, and am I comfortable with that before I click apply. So you can always view the stencil here. And you can also add a stencil from the public library to your personal library. And that's great for a couple of things. Firstly, if there's a long list in the public library, but there's a few that you use a lot, it's great to just add it into your own My Stencil library so that you can quickly access those. But it also gives you the ability to then make it your own. So once you've added it to My Stencils, it'll appear in your household index. You can edit it and really make it your own and bring in your unique conversations that you want to have with the clients by adding that into the stencil or adding things into notes. So work through the public library and think about which ones you want to bring into your library. But here, if I want to apply the stencil, I simply select apply, and now it's going to create or apply all the blocks that we've put into that template. And this is great because now I can expand the conversation with Jack around what are some of the other financials that they have. But it's also a great way of opening up conversation around potential gaps that there might be. And we do that by saying, clients like you typically have some of these different financials or they're thinking about them. And we want to work through that with you to unpack what are the financials that you have. Okay, so here, as part of the process, I'm going to flip across to just another tab here. And let's say we've now had that conversation with Jack and we've unpacked a little bit more of his current financial position. So we can see here that through that stencil conversation, Jack shared that he actually does have a group life cover as well. So we've added that in. He mentioned that in addition to the pension fund, he's got a retirement annuity. We've put that in. He's got some savings that he was just saving for, but now he wants to think about, can that help in assisting Jan with that engineering degree in 4 years? So we've put that in there, and he's got his home and home loan here at the bottom. So we might not have all the information, but we've gathered a bit more, and we can start thinking about how that helps and assists in meeting some of those priorities. So now we reach the end of that first conversation. We have a good understanding of what Jack wants to achieve. We've named the priorities. We've linked that to him. We've unpacked the current situation and understand a little bit more about what Jack has from a financial point of view. The next step now would be to go into the planning, to work through the target maps for those specific goals, to perhaps even create some scenarios for Jack around different options that he has, and then to have that conversation with him, either together with the client or, we might come up with some prior scenarios beforehand and then walk through it with them. So I'm going to take you into target maps. I'm not going to go through it in detail. I just want to point out a couple of features here that we can use to facilitate and enable that conversation. The first thing you'll see here is that I've used the same names as we did in the priorities. So to update the name in a target map, you just double click here and you can then retype the name. So I want to create that connection for Jack between what priorities we came up with, the financials he has, and how on track or how that's assisting in enabling these goals. So I've created one for sustaining the lifestyle, for saving for Jan's engineering degree, and to retire comfortably at age 65. The conversation here with Jack would be around working through those assumptions. Are these the needs that we have under the what you want? Is this what we're using for that? What does it mean? And how do we take a step forward? And a great way of facilitating or enabling that conversation is using the target map compare feature. And this can be used for, if I've got 3 scenarios for a specific goal, like 3 different retirement planning scenarios, and I want to work through, saving more, spending less, working longer. But it's also great if there's different goals that the client has that may even be competing goals. How I turn that on is I select the check boxes here and select compare. And you'll see it'll bring it up on one screen, really creating the space for this conversation around, if we do have 3 different goals, how are we going to approach that? Are we going to tackle one first and then work through the others? Or do we want to progress against all of them? And we could have different, conversations around that. But by showing it here on the screen in this target map compare, we can really open that discussion. And let's assume through this conversation with Jack, we've actually agreed that we want to progress on all of them. But given that this one is the top priority, we want to make sure we can, plug that gap, get enough life cover to sustain the lifestyle, but then we want to contribute a bit more towards this engineering degree. Even if we don't get 100% of the way there now, we want to progress, and we want to do the same with retirement. So you can see here, then I've created 3 more scenarios that I've called 2026 progress, showing if we do those things, if we take out more life cover, if we save a bit more and towards retirement and education, then look at the difference between them. So target map compare, if you're not using it yet, I would definitely try and bring that in to the process. It's just a great way of really facilitating that conversation around if there's different goals or if we're trying to achieve one and there's different options. It's a great way of enabling that. Okay, but let's say we've gone through all of that with Jack, and now we want to sort of summarize that. We want to summarize what are the things we've taken Jack through, what are the priorities, and what are the next steps? How do we move forward? And this is really where the sidebar becomes extremely powerful, because we don't have to move away from the asset map screen anymore. We can have this conversation on one screen. So it's not overwhelming as we flip through, different screens and work through different things. But I can start by saying to Jack, let's take a look at your priorities. Let's just recap on that. And you can see here in the panel on the right, it nicely shows the high priorities, shows the normal priorities, and also just to point out, it also shows resolved priorities at the bottom. So if I click on any priority and I mark it as resolved, so you see this little tick box at the bottom, it will move down to this resolved section. And that's great as we continue to meet with Jack over time to check in. What are the things that we've done already? But here, you can open up priorities on the side and say, let's just go through that again. These are the things we said we wanted to achieve. This is the current picture. Is anything different? Do we want to make any changes? From here, I can go straight into target maps. Again, not moving off the screen, staying on one screen and say, well, let's talk through again what your current situation is, your current ability to meet these goals and the changes that we're implementing and the impact that will have. And then I want to point out another great feature that I know some people are using, but if you're not using, I think this is a really great one. If you look at any of these target maps here, you'll see there's a little eye icon. If I click on that, it's going to gray out the asset map except for the financials that are being used in that specific target map. Again, now I can create that connection for the client between what have I built up this financial inventory over time, but how are we using that to achieve the different goals that we have? So just by clicking on that eye, I can remind Jack, remember this pension fund and the retirement annuity and our contributions to that. That's working towards funding our retirement. I can do the same for the savings. So, this investment now we've earmarked that for saving for Jan's engineering degree. So the client starts to see how these different financials are contributing to their goals, all on one screen, one conversation and engagement. Another point I want to make here is on the right, we can select certain target maps as a target. And we do it just by clicking on this little target button here in the top right. So I'm going to click on that for this one. And this is great if you've got a lot of different target maps. For example, you've run through 3 different scenarios for retirement, or you've run through multiple scenarios for multiple goals. You can go ahead and select, these are the ones that we're targeting. These are the ones that we are going to progress towards. And then at the top here, I can actually filter by that. So I can select targets, and it's only going to show me the ones that I've selected as a target. So another great way of just simplifying this conversation with the clients. Okay. And then another feature that works really well here is drafts. And I know we went through drafts in great detail in the last webinar, but just to reflect again, if I want to make this real for Jack, we've gone through what you wanted to achieve. We've gone through how your financials are enabling that in the target maps. Then I can also click on drafts and create a draft to show the impact of the changes that we are suggesting in order to progress this year. So I've created a draft here. As I turn it on, you'll see that it puts this orange border around and it highlights the proposed changes. So now I can just reiterate with Jack. Remember, we said we're going to add in this life cover. We're going to increase the contributions to the education savings fund. We're going to increase our pension fund contributions to progress against all of those priorities. And to do that, there's going to be these specific costs. And I've put that on as well so that we can also enable a conversation around affordability or any sort of additional conversations. But again, I'm just re-emphasizing these are the things that we're doing, and I'm keeping it on one page.
Maybe just to add to that, Kirsty, it's such an easy thing to slip into because we, the experts, and we understand what it means to, let's say, increase life cover or increase savings. We assume it's really obvious to a client. And so I find this it's really useful here in this step to talk through. Okay, so how do we do that? That means we're going to do this step 1, step 2, step 3, to achieve that, because otherwise in the client's mind they might go like, oh, this is a non-issue, or they go, this is a massive issue, and then they've got the wrong impression. So talk through, how do we, let's say, increase life cover, replace a policy, etc.
I think it's a good point. It's about that, making it really tangible for clients and stepping through that so that we're very, summarizing from beginning what you want to achieve, how we're going to do it, and what does that look like practically? What are the steps involved? So drafts is a great way of doing that. And then to end off the conversation with the clients, just going to move this out of the way. That's the draft. So to end off the conversation with the clients, then we could share with them, that we're going to generate a report and share that with you with everything we've covered today, from your priorities to the target maps to even the draft, and showing what we're going to implement. Or we could, of course, share the client portal with them. So just to talk through what that would look like, I can simply click on Jack. Of course, it opens up again in the sidebar, and I can navigate down to this client portal here. And here, when I go into the client portal, the first thing we'll see, let me just go back here. Close that. Okay, let's just start it again. When we go into the client portal, we'll see it comes up with 2 questions. Do you want the client to register with a specific email address, or are you happy for them to register with their own? You can either select that or not. And then selecting the permission sets. I can do it right here from the sidebar by selecting Jack, and I can decide what I want to give the client permission to on the client portal. I've created a couple of my own permission sets, so I'm going to click on one of those, and that's going to give Jack access to the asset map reports, where they can suggest changes, signals, as well as shared reports. And why that's important is I can say to Jack, post this meeting, I'm going to send you a link. Click on that link. It's going to ask you to verify your email and create a password. That's a once-off process. And from that point onwards, you can access the portal at any time. You can see your map. You can see the reports that I've shared with you, and you can even suggest changes as things in your life change, including even, exploring Amanda's picture, adding that through the portal. So at this point, I can set that up. I can create the invites. It's going to create a link, which I would then copy and email to Jack so that he can register and go onto the client portal. Just a reminder, I can also preview the client portal here. If I wanted to talk through, Jack, what would you see when you log onto that portal? How would you get your reports? I can click here and take the client through that. So I think that's a great way to just sort of end that process. Again, just summarizing everything from the map through Sidebar, ending with the client portal or the reports so that the client can access it. So thank you. That brings us sort of as we close out for today. I just want to remind you just to think about whether it's priorities, whether it's target map compare or Sidebar. How can you bring that practically in to your client's engagement process? Thank you very much.